Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. This week, we're talking all about the most trending topic on TikTok, I feel, which is the winter arc. And I feel like the winter arc wasn't really around last year.
Last year, I don't think so.
Yeah, I never heard of it. Or either that, or it was like it didn't break out of like the gym bro TikTok, because I think it's like a gym bro thing, like the winter arc. Because when I found it originally, I went and looked it up on Google. And somewhere like, like the Urban Dictionary type defined it in the context of like being a gym bro. And it was like, you like spend the winter away from women, away from dating, away from like other stuff. And you focus on like building muscle, starting a business, eating broccoli, all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But this year, because of the creative content girlies, I think winter arc for women started coming out. So like fitness winter arcs for women. And then it kind of expanded further into just like focusing and using the final 4 months of the year to really lock in and get your like get your habits on point, improve yourself, do all the things that you really meant to do earlier in the year, but you're going to just try with the final push of the final few months to achieve. And I think it's a really nice way to end the year, because personally, I like the idea of being like 3 months ahead of myself by the time I would usually be sitting and like picking out what goals I want to achieve for the year. So like come January 1st, 2025, I've actually built some momentum up and maybe even built some new habits and like built a sense of discipline. And then the things I want to achieve, or like the habits I want to continue building from 2025 onwards, is just so much easier to do. And lo and behold, I was scrolling my TikTok feed or my Instagram feed, and I saw Farah doing her winter arc challenge, and I was literally over the moon, because I just love when anyone chooses to do nice things for themselves and like build better habits, even if they're more difficult. And in the UK, I think winter arc is like
Difficult.
Doubly as bad, because you're doing all of these like annoying things, like waking up early, going to the gym, going for walks, eating properly when it's dark and cold, which just makes everything harder. I will moan about it until the end of time. But talk to me about your winter arc, Farah. What does this self-improvement challenge mean to you? Like, why have you done it? Have you structured yours in any like specific way as well?
Yeah, so I've also seen like everyone has taken it in a very, very different direction. And I actually love that, because it's like your goals are your own. Like what you want to achieve out of your own life is your own. And I know it was very much like a gym centric trend at first. To be honest, when I first discovered it, it was all the glow up girlies were on about these are the ways I'm glowing up in my life. And I love that. And I think that's what made me want to do it as well. Because I'm like, there is no better time than the present to get on your A game. And actually, like, we always think about our goals and the things like we're most motivated, or I think socially, me personally, I'm not very motivated in January at all to do anything, because once that like period's passed where like it's holiday season's ended and it's miserable weather, it's dark, it's cold, I find it really hard to be motivated at that point in time. So I've loved the idea of starting 3 months earlier, because then that also means that I've hopefully got the momentum already built up. So when January comes, I'm hoping that all these like habits and these like routines that I'm trying to build now are just going to be me continuing in January. I'm not going to be thinking, okay, what are my goals for the year and what do I want to start new and how am I going to do all these new things now, and like trying to like drag myself through it. So that's why I've kind of decided to jump on it now. And I think it's so motivating as well, seeing everyone else do it, because you're like, oh, well, I don't want to be left behind, so I want to be on the train too. But for me, I have focused it. Well, there's 3 areas. So I'm also documenting it on my socials, which is what Dev saw as well, my first video, where I want to kind of level up and just become like the best version of myself in 3 areas, like being happy, being healthy, and being wealthy. That's what I'm focusing on. So my like way of kind of like making sure I'm on track with that is I like each week I'll focus on like one of the 3. So I recently did a focus on like healthy. So that was, I'd just come back off holiday. I was eating takeout like constantly. My house was a mess. I obviously hadn't been to the gym because I was like enjoying my holiday. So when I came back, I was like, okay, this is the routine I need to like actually figure out and, like have something like a standard that I'm then going to like continue with. So that's what I started with in terms of, and it was little things. I'm not trying to like become like a different person, like push myself too far, but I wanted to focus on cooking at home more. So I wasn't going to like restrict so much on what I ate or like think too much about is it really, really healthy? Am I all these like nutrients or whatever you want to like think about when you are eating in general. I was just like, okay, I'm gonna go from takeout to home cooked. This is like my goal. And I've been doing that for the last couple of weeks. I've literally eaten out like twice, which is so good for me. So I've just been like really, and it also comes into the whole idea of like romanticizing these like more mundane things, and that's what I get out of vlogging it. That's my way of like romanticizing it, like vlogging myself going to the shops and like picking up my food and cooking my dinner. So that helps me a lot, which is why I like documenting these things. So that was one of my goals, which is something that I'm obviously like continuing to do, and I still will eat out. But it's one of those things where I'd rather be eating at home more often in the week than not, which I definitely wasn't doing for a very long time. So that was one thing I was focusing in my like healthy week when that was like my pillar of focus. And then also the gym was also my focus. And not so much like I'm gonna do these crazy weights and like have all these like gym goals. It was just me going from someone that didn't go to the gym at all to me actually having like a consistent routine of like showing up. So I've also been, what has my target been? I did want to go at least 3 times a week, which I think I've actually done. And for a minimum of 30 minutes, which I found really easy to do now because I found a new workout that I can do that is literally one workout for 30 minutes. Although I've adjusted it slightly recently because I found myself getting so bored of doing the same thing for 30 minutes straight. So, but it's nice like going to the gym. The more you go, the more you figure out like what you enjoy, what you don't, and the more you figure out like what you feel good about doing as well, like what makes you feel pumped like for the rest of the day and things like that. So that's what I was experimenting in that week. But there's other areas of my life I want to glow up in. Like I added happy because I was like, I'm not trying to be this like go back to this person that's like hustling all the time, and like obviously like wealthy is a part of my goal, so I want to think of like ways to grow my income streams and focus on that side of things more. But I didn't want everything to just be about like fitness and money and like all these external things, so that's why I added that third pillar of like focusing more on self-care and just to remind myself of like all those things as well, to balance it out. So I've also started meditation recently. This is something that I did.
Oh, wow.
I know, Deb, I'm like, I'm on a roll.
I'm like shook.
And do you know what? It's actually been life-changing. And it's crazy because I'd done this before. And all these like habits and things that I'm now really trying to like hone in on consistency.
Yeah.
They're things that I've tried before. It's flopped off. And they are usually the type of things that I start the year like with the intention of like, I'm going to start doing all these things and having these routines. And then as the year goes by, you kind of just like let things fall one by one. But hopefully me starting it now, I don't know, it might have a shift in perspective for me like mentally to like keep going with it. So yeah, meditation is something that I've always really wanted to like gel with because I've seen the benefits of it and I know it's beneficial. And do you know what actually finally made it click for me? I watched a podcast the other day, or like maybe a week or so ago, and they talked, oh, it's so annoying, I can't remember who did it or who spoke about it, but they spoke about how people that have, well, they really called me out essentially because they talked about if you're someone that goes to sleep like after like a busy day or just whatever kind of day you've had, even if you've not had like that much of a typical busy day, if you've got to the end of the day, you've got in bed, you're about to sleep, and suddenly you find yourself like really struggling to sleep. I don't know if I've spoken to you about this before, but I went through a massive period of time where I didn't have insomnia, but I just really struggled to sleep, or I'd wake up in the night, or my sleep was just really not good. And it wasn't because I was sleeping too late, it was just like poor quality of sleep, and I didn't understand what I was doing wrong. And this happened to me for ages. So I'd always feel groggy during the day. Like I was always feeling like unproductive, and I just didn't know how to resolve it. And then I watched this podcast episode, and he said, if you are the type of person that like fits those characteristics, you can't sleep, your mind is racing as soon as you get in bed, you always like are having these ideas going around your head, it's because you're not giving your mind a chance to process any of the information it's got during the day, because you're never giving your mind a rest. Because we think about like physical rest and things, but mental rest is something I've always very much struggled with, because I'm always thinking about something. I've always got something to do, or I've always got like something to think about doing, or if I'm not doing anything, I'm thinking about the next thing that needs to be done, and I never have that time. Or it doesn't even have to be that. It's like if you're not specifically doing work, then you're watching TV, then you're scrolling on your phone, then you've always got your mind preoccupied. And he was basically explaining how if you haven't given your mind a chance to actually process information during the day and given it that space to just like erupt and like just let it do its thing and like get through all that information that you've been taking in all day, it's going to do that in the evening when it's the first time that you've actually like had the chance to have an empty mind, because you haven't had that chance during the day. And it just like made so much sense to me, because I was like, well, yeah, that does make so much sense, that your mind is an overload and it's finally getting a chance to like process everything because it hasn't had a chance before. And so for the sake of getting better quality sleep, I've started meditating in the morning, where I will just let my mind, and meditation, I never really used to like understand like how to do it. But then I've come to realize there is actually no like right way. There's tons of ways to meditate. So for me, my way of doing it now is literally just like letting my mind go wherever it wants to go, and like just letting it process thoughts, not holding on to thoughts, just letting them pass. Because I always used to get caught up in this idea of, oh, you have to have nothing in your head when you're meditating.
I see, yeah.
And I used to like get really agitated by that, because I was like, but I can't physically think of nothing, and then thinking of nothing is boring anyway, so why am I going to do that? But I think I've just taught myself that if something does come to mind, which it always does, like your mind isn't literally going to shut off, especially when you first start, it's fine, but you just let it pass, and you just let yourself like have thoughts that kind of you can just kind of imagine them in your head, like I just sit in there, just like a thought pop up, and you letting it go, and you're just like letting yourself do that for like 10 minutes straight. And then I've had such like more peaceful sleeps than I've been having since I've been doing that, because I'm like giving my mind that chance. And it's also been really like interesting how much like clarity I've been getting on like my day-to-day stuff as well. You know, like I'll have thoughts about things that I won't even have time to usually think about, or like ideas of things that will come up, or just like ways of processing things. So for example, if there's something that I've dealt with that's like, you know, been like heavy on my mind, something stressful, when I've had those like meditation times, is I've actually like come up with like solutions, or not, but on purpose, because I've been thinking about it. It just kind of like comes to you, because when you give your mind that space, like it does sort yourself like your problems out and stuff. But normally you can just be so stressed about these things, and like, but then you distract yourself, so you're not actually giving yourself a chance to figure it out. So there's like a few different things that I have been doing so far. I'm still very much on the journey. But how have you been doing it, Dev? Like, what's your experience with the winter arc been?
Well, I have structured it to literally no end because I needed that. And that's how my brain works. But I started mine. So I've kind of done mine as like 100-day sprint towards the end. Towards the end of the year, because a few years ago I did kind of like a similar thing. I did like a 70-day sprint, because I really like to look at like September to January as like the last bit of movement towards the things you want, so that you can use the New Year's time to see if you're like still aligned, and also just like check on yourself with your goals, and like, do you still want to be moving towards the things that you have been moving towards, rather than starting from scratch at that point. And that's something that I picked up from like Mel Robbins years ago on one of our podcasts. She said that like, especially if you love the like academic year, and that you find yourself feeling like re-inspired, reinvigorated around September time, or like after summer, which is what I've always felt. So I just like the idea of taking action from September onwards. So I did my 100-day sprint, and I divided it up into 4 25-day mini sprints. And then because I've spent a lot of this year procrastinating and just being in my own way a lot, I decided to use the sprints to really just kind of take that down and like break it down small, like through really small pieces. So I've set really, really tiny tasks for each sprint. Like sprint 1, for example, I'm doing 3 daily things. I'm like planning each day. I'm reading 10 pages and I'm doing 30 minutes to my body every day. So it's like encouraging, they're like smaller versions of like the bigger things I want to do or like want to be eventually over the course of my life. And see, at the beginning when you said like, you're not kind of aiming too high and you don't want to change things too much in terms of like be a whole new different person, in my head I'm like, I actually want to be like a completely different version of myself, because the version of myself that I have been thus far in my life is like a version of my old self that's kind of slowly getting better, whereas I really want to like push myself into overdrive and like completely leave behind like my old habits, my old sense of self. I want to really change a lot, but I'm starting small with these sprints. And then like with sprint 2, sprint 3 and 4, I'm going to add 1 new daily tick. So by the end of the year, I'm not doing anything drastic, but hopefully I'll have like 6 things every single day that I've been consistently doing that are tiny. Like the tasks in itself, apart from like 30 minutes for my body, they don't itself take any longer than maybe like 10 to 15 minutes, apart from maybe the reading if I'm not concentrating very much. But so I'm doing it in a super small way, but like I want to have a big impact by the end of it. And I just like the idea of like making small changes, because for me, I'm going to procrastinate less if that task is super tiny. And I like the idea that like I know I'm like proud of you for doing it and stuff. And like, I like to see you also making good decisions for yourself. But in my head, I'm like, oh, Farah's also doing the winter arc, or like she's also doing like something good for herself. So like, I really want to as well. Like I want to keep going. I want to keep myself like accountable. It's really that sense of like, oh, everyone else is doing it. I don't want to get to January and be
FOMO.
like, yeah. It's like a nice FOMO. This is the FOMO that I want. So yeah, it's been really good because like it also gives me a sense of purpose each day, because there's been days before, especially during winter, when you wake up and you're kind of like, okay, I'm just going to do the things I need to get done today, in terms of like, oh, I have like this call or this project that needs to be finished. I know I need to go to the gym, but do I really need to go to the gym today? You know, like you're kind of foggy sometimes about like, what do you actually want to get done each day? And challenges like this give you like a real sense of daily purpose, which I really, really love. But I think you've inspired me to start maybe like meditating a little bit, because I was quite, ironically, the times I've been good at meditating are the times I'm like, I've been super stressed. And last time I was super stressed was while I still had my corporate job. And I like the way that you've kind of described it in terms of like just like letting your thoughts run. I've also heard meditation be described as like being an observer of your own thoughts, and that's how I used to do it. Like I would sit back and like just observe myself thinking, and then the more you observe, the less you think, because it's almost like stage fright as well. Like you know someone's watching, so you can't like think as normal. Yeah. But it's been really nice, because like even this week I've tried to be a bit more present with like my thoughts, because for example yesterday I was putting together a reel and I needed to find a picture of myself. It was like a fitness transformation reel. So I was trying to find myself, videos or pictures of myself from last year where like it was a bad angle or, you know, like something like that. Mm-hmm. And I came across these videos from the gym and my workouts from 2.5 years ago. And I look really different. And I don't want to say it in a bad way, because I don't want to like hate on myself. Yeah. Again, but you know, like I looked really different, and I've obviously made changes for the better this year. And it was literally only a couple of days ago I was looking at these pictures and I was like, in my head I was being really mean. I was like, what a mess. And I was kind of like, I was just kicked into being quite mean to myself. And I I had to actively tell myself, like, oh, what are you saying there? Let's just take a step back. Why are you thinking these thoughts? All the meanwhile, by the way, this is all happening in like a 30-second time period. Just explaining all of my thoughts. So I think like doing meditation when I've been stressed has given me the ability to like almost use being present and like observing your own thoughts as like a knee-jerk reaction to when you're maybe going into like a negative thought cycle or you're overthinking now, which is I think a really great practice because yeah, I was like you. I used to think like I'm only meditating if there's absolutely nothing in my mind. And then I would also count me trying to meditate and struggling to get things out of my mind as like failed meditation,
Yeah.
which doesn't help because that is still meditation. Like you trying to empty your mind is you observing your own thoughts, and therefore meditating. But yeah, I think for me, I'm using Winter Arc to almost like do the woo-woo things in a structured, like science-backed way.
We will be in the meditation and because it's true what you say. Like when you do practice stuff like that, like I found myself actually not having anything in my head, like waiting for stuff to come, and I'm like, where are you? Like what's going on?
I know you're there.
And I'm like, hello. And it's so weird because you're right. When you do expect it or you do like see it in that perspective, you end up being able to do it a lot easier. So maybe that's just a tip for someone that does also struggle with meditation or taking it up. Maybe that's an approach to try, because if we both found that like more helpful, then yeah, I think it's a good perspective to look at it in. But I'm really interested in your point where you mentioned about you wanting to like completely reinvent yourself or like just be a completely different person. And I want to know like where that comes from, because when in my mind, when I've thought to myself about like my goals or where I want to be next, or like just going through this winter arc process, I've always come at it from the perspective of a better version of me. So that's what I'm kind of striving for. But I want to know more about like your more drastic approach to like completely reinventing yourself and like where that's come from.
Good question. I think so. Just hearing you say a better version of me, because obviously I don't want to change myself in terms of like, oh, you can't recognize that me in 2023 is not the same as me in 2025, for example. But I think maybe the thing I want to really change in terms of overhauling completely is like the speed at which I want to make these changes. Because in my head, basically, all these big goals and dreams and stuff that I have for myself, I know that the current version of me would not be able to achieve those things, because I'm very aware of like my limiting beliefs right now. The fact that I procrastinate too much, the fact that I'm like in this like I'm aware of the things that I need to get rid of in order to achieve the things that I want, but not in a way that I'm like I hate on them or like I don't see the value in the fact that those are still the things that have got me to the version of myself I am today. But because I have the awareness, I'm like, okay, I know I need to get rid of these things. I know how to get rid of these things. And I know the steps required to achieve my goals. Why not just do them instead of like taking my time to get there? Especially when I am someone who's like I've spent so long like researching and like listening and like listening to podcasts, reading books, doing all of these things to find out how to improve myself, but not really taking action on all the things to do that. So in my head, I'm like, I can be a completely different version of myself. I know exactly how to do it. Why not just do it now and then become that version of myself so that I can achieve my goals, rather than like taking it super, super slow, because I've done that. It's got me to where I am now, but it took me like years. You know what I mean? So it's like a speed thing for me. But now that I'm saying that out loud, I'm like, okay, well, what's the rush? And the rush it's more so that like, there's nothing else I want more. So why not rush?
Yeah, I get you. And then with your, so you, because the way you've structured yours is so organized, like, so how are you keeping yourself so disciplined to like all these, like the sprints and the things that you want to do? Because the way I approach these things, and I've just noticed this about the way I operate in general, is I have to have room for free flow. So the way I even like choose, okay, what am I going to do this week for like this whole thing in general, I will plan that literally the week before. So I've started doing the like every weekend I've blocked out some time to actually like plan the rest of the week ahead, not anything beyond that. I have these like general goals that I want like over a period of time, but in terms of like what I do day to day, that's planned a week in advance max, rather than like, okay, for the next few months, like this is how my routine's going to be and this is what I'm going to do every day. I find that so stressful. So I'm just interested to know. And it's only because I know that if I try and commit to that and then something like falls out of line for whatever reason, because maybe something else comes up that I feel is a bigger priority in that time, and things just can shift naturally, that would like really weigh on me and like irritate me, and then I'd feel like everything's out of sync. So how do you like manage that or like keep disciplined?
So for you, is your discipline coming from like your ability to plan in like that during that weekend time, like plan ahead and like know how you're going to overcome any obstacles and stuff like that?
Yeah, because I think with it being a short-term plan, like I plan for that week, this is everything I'm gonna do based on the wider goals that I have, and that's how I know I'm gonna get closer to my end goal. I don't know, I just find a lot of motivation in be like having that flexibility. Like I'm carving out, okay, this week could look a bit different to the week before, but I'm still getting everything done. So
I
that's kind
see
of
what you mean.
how
I think
I
for
do it.
me, I've taken a lot of the like the reasons I was successful with 75 hard earlier in this year. I've really brought to like this challenge now and like my 100-day sprint, because there's two main things I've done and I'm doing. So one thing is like I'm doing my daily planning. So that's one of my ticks itself, is daily planning, and that tick allows me and forces me to think ahead of how I'm going to get my ticks done the next day, because I usually do my daily planning the night before the next day. So the daily planning allows me to understand, okay, on a daily basis, how am I going to make this work? And then because I'm quite like type A and like I love calendars and all this kind of stuff, right? I know over the course of the next 100 days, I know the things that are in my calendar, and I know like certain obligations I have in terms of like, for example, traveling home to see my parents, upcoming trips. I know where I could make any kind of flexible adjustments to accommodate like last minute lunches with friends or something like that. Like I know how I could maybe adjust things. But then the final thing that I do, which is slightly like not controversial but hard advice, is like this challenge is important to me. And completing this challenge and sticking to my daily ticks and not missing a single tick or a single day is really important to me. So I'm going to make it work. So, like, if something comes up that risks me not being able to hit my ticks or like complete a day, I'm not going to let it. Like, for example, if I don't know, like last minute meetings or a last minute trip or something like that comes up, maybe that means I'm declining that meeting or like actually saying no to that external situation in order to hit my ticks. And like I think why some people might struggle with that advice is because they're like, oh well, it's just 10 pages of reading a day, like I can give that up if it means I get to go out for dinner or like, you know, do something that comes up quite last minute. Whereas actually, if it's important, for you, like if your overall reason for doing this challenge is because you want to become more knowledgeable or you want to become a better speaker or you want to become, you know, like whatever it is that you've got a deep connected goal with why you want to become a consistent reader. If that is important enough to you, the daily discipline has to be important enough to you as well. So it's kind of like a balance of like, okay, I'll make room and like I'll plan ahead for these little things that could come up, but the bigger things, I'm going to make sure that they don't get in the way of me getting my ticks in, because this challenge is that important to me. And I've really only taken that away from 75 Hard because I had to make sacrifices, and I had to, you know, really communicate like boundaries with friends. Like I think I've spoken to you about like, well, if I wanted to meet my friends, I had to say like, I can't see you unless it's a 45-minute walk outside. Or, you know, so it's like, and because that was important to me, like finishing the challenge was important to me, and like not bailing because I wanted to see my friend but they couldn't make the walk outside, like that it was just not going to happen, you know. So it's a case of like, well, how are you going to do, or how are you going to adjust your life or your schedule to make this work? Like how important is it to you to actually complete this challenge, or is it just something that you've gotten excited about doing and you're all wrapped up in the newness of it, and as soon as something difficult comes up, that's when you kind of stumble, you know, which is kind of, I feel mean saying that.
No, but it's fair. I think, yeah, it makes sense that because you've done such an intense challenge already this year, you have already built up that stamina and that discipline to go again with something like more personal and like the extra goals that you have. But I'm just thinking, for someone that hasn't really had an experience of like this prolonged period of time where they're really, really focused and that discipline with their goals. I know that you've recently set up a community where you have a lot of people that are involved and like interacting with like the goals that they've set for themselves and stuff. So I feel like that is something that would be so helpful for people like starting it new. And do you feel like that is something that kind of propels you even further to stick to things and be more disciplined?
Yeah, definitely. And you've just reminded me that like another way that I am staying disciplined is by posting about this challenge online, and like having like all the entire world knowing that like I've said I wanted to do this challenge. They might be checking up on me in January being like, oh, did you stick to this? And I have to be like, oh no, I didn't, it only lasted a week. Like that's not happening.
Embarrassing.
Exactly. Like it's almost like I've created public accountability. But aside from that, yeah, the community, there's two ways I wasn't expecting it to be as supportive as it is. Like the first way is like the people in the community. It's so crazy to me that like I'm using Circle to like host everyone and like have everyone be together in there, and there's an app for it as well, which is super convenient. And people have messaged me saying that they wake up and the first thing they do is check the app and like put their daily accountability plan in, which I think is so nice, because like they are very aware of the fact that they've joined this group and there's a bunch of people in the group who are all kind of counting on each other to keep going, so that it kind of keeps you going as well. And like I've never been part of like a public group doing a challenge. Like I've always, like with 75 Hard, I did with my friends and my partner, and my fitness kind of journey this year I've done with like an actual coach online who's just one person. So it's been really cool to see how that actual group accountability comes through and pulls like an individual person towards their goals. And then in the second way is that I'm really like I'm being kept on top of everything, because in my head I'm like, I've got hundreds of people who are like counting on me to get them to the end of the year. So in a similar way to me posting online about the challenge, having a group of pretty much strangers put their eggs in your basket to hit all of these goals that they have in their mind as well. Like for me, it keeps me going as well. So I think obviously there's so much psychological power in having accountability buddies, friends, and groups. And I can really see that playing out with a community, which you can join if you want.
I was thinking about that. Yeah, I was actually thinking, because now I've actually got a better idea of like what I want to achieve. Because I know when you initially posted it was at the beginning of October, and I'm always a bit late to the party on everything. So I was like, okay, I need to actually think about what my goals and stuff are. But no, I think that's a really good idea, and I really want to join as well, because I've never also been a part of like a community where everyone's kind of working towards things and like updating each other, and it is that accountability. It does like hold you accountable for the things that you've said that you want to do. And I also do get that from my own content, is I know whenever I post something saying I'm going to do something, I do it on purpose because then I'm like, well, now I have to because now I've just told the world that's what I'm going to do. And it's embarrassing to then go back and be like, yeah, about that thing. That's not happening anymore. Like, it's more uncomfortable to do that than actually just continue what you said you were going to do and complete it. But let's definitely, if there's still space in your group, put the link to it in the description or wherever we can. So if anyone listening wants to join and hold themselves accountable and get on their winter arc, and get locked in, then you will have a ready-made community ready to welcome you in and help you on that journey. Because I think also the scariest part of starting anything like this is feeling a bit alone, or feeling like, if your friends or your family, people around you aren't interested, they don't care about leveling up, they don't care about their self-development, they don't care about what's happening next year, they don't care about all these things that you maybe care about. I feel like that can also be a barrier to why people like struggle to get started, because they just feel very alone in it. So I love the fact that you've set this group up, and I hope to see some of our listeners join.
I know, that would be really exciting. I'll make like a special link. That's what I'll do. Okay, that's super exciting. So hopefully this has inspired some of you to take some action, whether that's thinking or actually planning out what and when you want to change over the next few months. There's still plenty of time to actually make like really impactful changes, in my opinion. So I'll drop the link in the show notes. So definitely join if you're interested in having a bit of accountability and community support to get there. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe, leave us a comment, tell us what your goals are, and if this has inspired you to kind of take some action. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, don't forget to follow us and rate the podcast as well. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.